Eliza Walker had always believed that the family dining room was more than just a place to eat. It was where life-changing decisions were made. Where silence carried more weight than words. Where people smiled politely while their hearts quietly cracked. That night, the long oak table was set neatly as always. Plates of warm food sat untouched, steam rising gently into the air. Outside, the lake shimmered through the wide windows, reflecting moonlight like a silver mirror. The lake house had been in their family for 3 generations. It wasn't just a house. It was childhood summers. It was fishing with Dad. It was Mom's laughter floating across the water. It was where Eliza learned who she was. And tonight, it was about to be taken from her. Eliza sat across from her parents, hands folded tightly in her lap. Her older brother, Mark, sat beside her, casually scrolling through his phone, unaware, or pretending to be. Her mother cleared her throat. "We wanted to talk to both of you about something important," she said. Mark finally looked up. Eliza's heart started pounding. Her father leaned forward, his fingers laced together. "It's about the lake house." Eliza felt the air leave her lungs. "The upkeep is getting harder for us," her mother continued. "The repairs, the taxes, it's just too much now." Eliza nodded quietly. She understood that part. But she didn't understand what came next. "We've decided," her father said carefully, "to give the lake house to Mark." Mark's face lit up in shock and excitement. "Wait, really?" he said, smiling wide. "You're serious?" Her parents nodded. Eliza didn't move. It felt as though someone had pressed pause on her entire body. "The lake house. Mark." Her brother looked over at her. "Liz, this is great, right?" Eliza forced a smile. "Yeah," she whispered. "Great." But inside, something was breaking. That house was where she stayed when her parents were sick. Where she cleaned, repaired, and paid bills without ever being asked. Where she went when she needed peace. And now it belonged to someone who rarely even visited. Her mother reached for Eliza's hand. "You understand, don't you? Mark needs it more. He's building a family. You're so independent." Independent. That word had always been used like a compliment, but tonight, it felt like a punishment. Because independent meant forgotten. Her father continued, "The lawyer will handle the paperwork. We'll all meet tomorrow." Eliza nodded. She didn't trust her voice. Mark was already talking about renovations and parties. Eliza barely heard him. All she could think about was how quietly her world had just changed. Later that night, she stood alone by the window in her childhood bedroom, staring out at the lake. The water was still. So was her heart. But not for long. Something was about to come to the surface. Eliza did not sleep that night. The lake outside her window glowed softly under the moonlight, the water moving gently as if it were breathing. That lake had always felt like a living thing to her, quiet, steady, and full of memory. Tonight, it felt like it was watching her, judging her, asking her why she had said nothing. She sat up in bed, hugging her knees to her chest. Her parents' voices replayed in her head. "We've decided to give the lake house to Mark. Not share. Not consider. Give." Just like that. She pressed her hand against her chest, feeling the ache grow stronger. It wasn't just disappointment. It was the pain of being invisible. Of being the one who always showed up, and never got chosen. Eliza slipped out of bed and quietly walked down the hallway. The house was silent. Mark's bedroom door was closed, probably filled with excitement and dreams of his new property. He would be telling friends, planning weekends, imagining a future that now included something Eliza had quietly protected for years. She stepped outside onto the wooden porch. The air was cool. The smell of the lake, clean, wet, familiar, wrapped around her like a memory. "How did I lose it?" she whispered. She had been the one who stayed when their parents were sick. The one who fixed broken doors, paid overdue taxes, cleared snow from the deck. And yet, she was never the one rewarded. Her phone buzzed. A message from Mark. "Crazy news, right? Don't worry, you'll always be welcome there. Always welcome. Not always belonging." Eliza wiped tears from her face. Something wasn't right. And deep down, she knew tomorrow's meeting with the lawyer was not going to be as simple as everyone thought. Eliza arrived at the attorney's office the next morning with a strange feeling in her chest. Not quite fear, not quite hope, but something unsettled, like the air before a storm. The building was old and made of red brick, sitting just a few blocks from the lake. She had driven past it many times without noticing it before. Today, it felt important. Heavy. Like it was holding secrets. Mark's car was already parked outside. Of course. He was always early when something benefited him. Eliza took a deep breath and stepped inside. The waiting room smelled faintly of old books and polished wood. Soft instrumental music played in the background, the kind that was meant to calm people down, though it only made Eliza feel more tense. Her parents were already seated. Her mother looked nervous, twisting her wedding ring. Her father stared at the floor as if it might reveal something he wasn't ready to see. Mark, on the other hand, looked confident. He sat with his arms crossed and a small smile on his face, the smile of someone who believed the future belonged to him. "Eliza," her mother said softly when she saw her. "You're here." "I wouldn't miss it," Eliza replied, even though part of her wanted to run. A door opened and a tall man in a grey suit stepped out. His hair was neatly combed, his glasses resting low on his nose. "Walkers?" he asked. They all stood. "I'm Henry Cole," he said. "Please come in." The office was quiet, lined with shelves of legal books that smelled like dust and time. A large window behind the desk looked out toward the lake, though only the tops of trees were visible. "They Saturday." Henry adjusted his papers. "We are here today to go over the deed and estate arrangements regarding the Walker family lake house." Mark leaned forward eagerly. Eliza kept her hands folded in her lap, her nails digging into her skin. Henry glanced at the parents. "Before I begin, I want to be very clear. This document is legally binding and includes several clauses that must be read aloud in full." Eliza noticed something strange. Mark looked suddenly less relaxed. Her mother swallowed. Henry opened the folder. "According to this deed, the lake house is being transferred to Mark Walker as the primary title holder." Mark grinned. Eliza stared straight ahead. "But," Henry continued, "this transfer includes several conditional clauses attached to Eliza Walker." Eliza's heart skipped. Mark blinked. "What?" Henry lifted his eyes. "Eliza Walker is named as a protected beneficiary under this deed." The room went quiet. "What does that mean?" Mark asked sharply. "It means," Henry said calmly, "that while you will legally own the house, Eliza retains specific rights that cannot be removed." Eliza slowly looked up. Her parents avoided her eyes. Henry continued, "Clause 1 states that Eliza has full lifetime access to the property. You cannot restrict her from entering or using the lake house for any reason." Mark frowned. "Clause 2, Henry said, turning the page, states that 50% of any rental income generated from the property belongs to Eliza." "What?" Mark snapped. Eliza's breath caught. "Clause 3, Henry added, states that if Mark ever attempts to sell the property, Eliza must be offered the right to purchase it first, at market value, before it can be sold to anyone else." Mark stood up. "That's not what we agreed to." Henry looked at him. "This is what your parents signed." Mark turned to them. "You didn't tell me any of this." Eliza looked between them, her emotions tangled. Her mother finally spoke. "We didn't know how to tell you." Mark laughed bitterly. "So you just hid it." Her father spoke quietly. "Eliza has been paying the property taxes for years. You weren't there, Mark." Mark's face paled. Eliza stared at them in shock. You knew," she whispered. Her mother nodded. "We knew. And we wanted to protect you." Eliza felt tears rise. She had never asked for recognition. But she had deserved it. Henry folded his hands. This deed was written to reflect contribution, not favoritism. Silence filled the room. For the first time in her life, Eliza realized something profound. The house had never truly been taken from her. And neither had her place in this family. The air in the attorney's office felt thick after Henry Cole finished reading the clauses. Mark was still standing. His face had lost all its color. "This has to be a mistake," he said, his voice sharp. "You didn't tell me any of this." His parents looked small in their chairs now. Eliza sat frozen, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Henry calmly slid the document across the desk. "There is no mistake. These terms were written carefully and signed months ago." Mark snatched the pages and scanned them. His jaw tightened with every line. "This means I don't even fully own it," he snapped. "You own it," Henry corrected. "But not without responsibility." Eliza finally spoke. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "We didn't know how. We were ashamed." "Of what?" Eliza asked softly. "Of how much you gave, and how little we acknowledged it." Her father nodded. "You kept that house alive when we couldn't. You never asked for credit. But we saw it." Eliza's breath trembled. Years of quiet work. Years of being overlooked. And now, this. Mark slammed the papers down. "So I get the house but she gets the benefits." Henry's voice remained steady. "You get the structure. She gets protection." Eliza looked at Mark. "I didn't ask for this." "I know," he said bitterly. "That's what makes it worse." The truth settled over them. This wasn't about a house. It was about years of imbalance finally being put on paper. Her mother whispered, "We love you both. We tried to make it fair." But fairness always felt different when you had never been favored. Eliza rose slowly. "I don't want to fight over this." Mark met her eyes. For the first time, he saw her not as the quiet sister, but as someone who had carried the weight he never knew existed. And the deed was still lying there, quiet, legal, unmovable. Like truth. Mark was still staring at the papers as if they had betrayed him. "There has to be something else," he muttered. "Some fine print. Some trick." Henry Cole adjusted his glasses. "Actually, there is one more clause." Everyone looked up. Eliza felt her stomach twist. "This clause," Henry said, flipping to the final page, "was added personally by your parents." Her mother squeezed her father's hand. "It states that Eliza Walker is the permanent guardian of the emotional and historical value of the lake house." Mark frowned. "That's not a legal term." "It is in this context," Henry replied. "It means any major renovation, sale, or destruction of the property must be approved by Eliza." Mark let out a short laugh. "So I can't even change the paint without her?" "Not without her consent," Henry said. Eliza's eyes widened. "I never knew about this." Her father looked at her. "We were afraid you'd say no." "No to what?" she whispered. "To protecting the only place that ever made you feel safe." Silence wrapped around them. Mark dropped back into his chair. "So this was never mine alone," he said quietly. "No," Henry replied. "It was never meant to be." Eliza felt something shift inside her, not victory, not revenge, but recognition. For the first time in her life, someone had put her value into words. Legal words. Permanent words. And nothing scared her more than that. The room had gone quiet after Henry Cole read the final clause. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. The kind that comes when something long hidden finally steps into the light. Mark leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling as if trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. Eliza sat stiffly, her mind racing. The lake house, the place she had loved quietly for so many years, had suddenly become the center of something much larger than property. Henry closed the folder slowly. "There's more," he said. Everyone froze. Her mother's face drained of color. Her father's lips pressed together tightly. Eliza looked between them. "What do you mean, more?" Henry glanced at the parents. "They asked me to wait until this moment to explain the full financial history connected to the lake house." Mark let out a short, bitter laugh. "Of course they did." Henry turned to Eliza. "Ms. Walker, for the last 6 years, the property taxes, repairs, and insurance on the lake house were paid from an account in your name." Eliza felt her breath catch. "What? You didn't know?" Mark snapped. Eliza shook her head. I paid when I could. I didn't know everything was official. Henry nodded. You weren't meant to. Your parents quietly added you as the account holder after your first payments. You unknowingly kept the property solvent. Her mother started crying. You were saving it, she whispered. We just let you. Eliza felt something inside her twist. So while Mark was living his life, I was carrying this. Her father nodded slowly. We didn't realize how unfair it was until it was almost too late. Mark slammed his hand on the desk. You let her do this while you told me the house was secure. You never asked, her mother cried. I didn't think I had to. Eliza stood up. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. I didn't do it for ownership. I did it because it was the only place that felt like home. Everyone went silent. Henry leaned back slightly, giving them space. Eliza wiped her eyes. You all let me believe I was just helping. That I didn't matter. Her father spoke softly. You mattered more than you knew. Mark looked at her, something different in his eyes now, not anger, but guilt. I didn't know, he said. I know, Eliza replied. But that doesn't mean it didn't hurt. For years, she had been the background support. The reliable one. The one who didn't ask. And now the truth was out. The lake house wasn't a gift. It was something she had already paid for. With money. With time. With love. Henry cleared his throat. Legally speaking, this deed recognizes that reality. Eliza sat back down slowly. The weight she had carried for so long finally had a name. And it was called truth. Mark didn't speak for a long time after the truth came out. His eyes were fixed on the table, jaw tight, fingers curled into fists. He looked like someone who had just realized the ground beneath him wasn't solid anymore. So that's it, he finally said. I've been living in a fantasy. Eliza didn't reply. I thought I was the responsible one. The one you trusted, he continued, his voice rising. Meanwhile, she was paying for everything. Her mother whispered, we didn't mean for it to be like that. But it was, Mark snapped. He turned to Eliza. Why didn't you say anything? Because no one ever listened, she said quietly. That hurt him more than anything. You think I wouldn't have helped? I think you never had to, she replied. Mark stood up, pacing. So now what? I'm the bad guy. No, Eliza said. You're just finally seeing the truth. He stopped pacing. You always made it look easy. Like you didn't need anyone. Eliza met his eyes. That was survival. Not strength. Silence fell between them. Mark sat back down slowly. For the first time in his life, he felt like the younger sibling. And it scared him. The room felt smaller than usual. The afternoon light from the lake-filtered windows cut across the floor in slanted lines, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch the distance between them. Eliza's heart thudded in her chest, each beat echoing the years of suppressed pain she'd carried. She could feel Mark watching her. He leaned back in the chair, arms crossed, trying to maintain his usual air of superiority, but there was tension in his jaw, in the slight tremor of his fingers resting on the table. He was uncomfortable, Eliza knew that. And she knew exactly why. For years, she had been quiet. She had been the shadow in the family, the one who didn't make demands, didn't seek attention, didn't complain. She had been the responsible one, always cleaning up after everyone else, paying bills, keeping the lake house in shape, making sure everything was taken care of. All without recognition, all without gratitude. And now, sitting in the same room as Mark, she finally realized she had a voice, and she intended to use it. Mark, she began, her voice soft but steady. Do you even understand what the lake house meant to me? He tilted his head, a hint of defensiveness creeping into his expression. Of course I do. It's our family house. What do you mean? Eliza's eyes burned. It's more than that. It's where I spent every weekend of my childhood making memories, learning life lessons, and trying to keep everything together while everyone else ignored what was really happening. It's where I cleaned up after your messes, took care of the repairs, paid the taxes, And yet somehow, I wasn't even considered when the time came to decide who owned it. Mark's mouth opened, then closed. He didn't reply immediately. His silence, heavy and tense, made Eliza continue. You don't know what it's like to love something quietly, to pour everything you have into it and be invisible while everyone else gets the credit. And now, when it's supposedly yours, you're acting like it's all some prize you've won, without realizing how much of me is in this house. Mark's face reddened. His fingers gripped the edge of the table. Eliza, I didn't know. You never told anyone. That's because no one was listening, she snapped, her voice cracking with emotion. You didn't listen. Mom didn't listen. Dad didn't listen. And for years, I thought that was okay because I was supposed to be strong, quiet, dependable, the one who never complained. But it wasn't okay. It never was. Her parents shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, guilt and sorrow written all over their faces. Her mother's hands trembled in her lap. Her father avoided looking at her, staring instead at the polished wood table, as if it held answers he had long failed to give. Mark finally leaned forward, his voice rising. Eliza, No, she cut him off, the anger and hurt rising to the surface. You sit there and act like this is just about a house. But it's not. It's about every time I made sacrifices and no one even noticed. It's about being left behind, being ignored, being invisible in the family that was supposed to love me. Tears streamed down her cheeks now. Her voice softened, trembling with a vulnerability she had rarely allowed herself to show. Do you have any idea what it feels like to see someone else take what you've been protecting for years, and everyone acts like it's nothing? Like it was always theirs to take. Mark's eyes softened slightly, guilt flickering there, but it wasn't enough. Eliza, I never realized. Exactly, she said, her voice rising again, more controlled this time, like a dam breaking in a precise, purposeful way. You never realized. You never asked. You never noticed. And now you get the house, but I'm supposed to be happy because I still get a benefit from it on paper? That doesn't make up for a lifetime of being invisible. That doesn't erase years of silence and neglect. Her mother tried to speak, her voice trembling. Eliza, I don't want excuses. Eliza snapped, standing now. She paced a few steps, her fingers curling into fists. I want acknowledgement. I want understanding. I want someone to see me, not just what I can do for them, but who I am. And maybe it's too late for that. Maybe it's always been too late. Mark sat frozen. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His usual confidence was gone. The weight of her words, the years of hidden labor and unspoken pain, had stripped him bare. Eliza's voice softened again, and she turned to her parents. You wanted to protect me. Why? Because I always handled everything. Because I never asked for help. You thought you were protecting me by letting me carry the weight alone. Her eyes flashed. That's not protection. That's abandonment in disguise. Her father finally spoke, his voice low and broken. Eliza, we see it now. We've always seen it. We just didn't know how to acknowledge it. We were wrong. We failed you. Her mother nodded. We thought we were doing what was best for the family. But we ignored you, and we're so sorry. Eliza took a deep breath, the tightness in her chest slowly loosening. I don't need apologies, she said. I need to be seen. I need you to understand that I've been here all along, quietly holding things together, and that my work and sacrifices are real. Mark's voice was almost a whisper now. I get it. I didn't see it before, but I do now. I see you. Eliza turned to him, her eyes wet but determined. Then understand this, Mark. The lake house is more than a building. It's my childhood, my memories, my efforts, my care. You may legally own it, but that doesn't mean you understand it, or that you can just take it for granted. And if you ever try to disregard the history or the heart in this house, you'll have me to answer to. For the first time, Mark looked small in the room, no longer the confident older brother who always got his way. He nodded, his jaw tight, the realization sinking in that he had underestimated her strength for too long. Eliza felt a shift inside herself. She had spoken her truth, and though the room still carried tension, it was now honest tension. Not the quiet resentment of the past, but something real, raw, and unbroken. She glanced at her parents, who were watching her with solemn pride and regret. And for a fleeting moment, she realized that being seen didn't erase the pain. It didn't erase the years of invisibility. But it was the first step toward balance, toward acknowledgement, toward something closer to justice. The lake house, she realized, was never just a structure. It was a reflection of her life, her care, her dedication. And for the first time, everyone in that room understood, not just on paper, but in heart, that Eliza had always been the keeper of its soul. Her chest eased. She had stood up for herself. She had confronted the long years of neglect. And though the road ahead with Mark and her parents would be complicated, she knew this. She would no longer be invisible. She would no longer be silent. And no one, not even her family, could take that away from her. The lawyer's office had emptied, leaving only Eliza, Mark, and their parents. The air was thick with unspoken words, heavy with tension and exhaustion. Sunlight slanted through the blinds, casting stripes across the floor like invisible bars. For the first time in a long time, Eliza felt something shift. But she wasn't sure if it was relief or fear, because she could sense that Mark was beginning to see the truth, and she had no idea how he would handle it. Mark sat slouched in his chair, staring at the folded deed on the table. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet, almost painful introspection. He had spent his whole life believing that privileges came naturally to him, that attention, affection, and ownership were his by default. He'd thought he was the favored child, the golden one, always chosen, always prioritized. But the last few hours had cracked that illusion. Eliza watched him carefully. She didn't know if he was angry or scared. Part of her didn't want to care, not after all she had endured silently. But as she looked at him, she realized that the anger he carried was mostly confusion. He was trying to process that his perception of reality had been wrong for so long, and it terrified him. "Liz," he started quietly, almost like he wasn't sure he had permission to speak. I didn't know. I didn't know you were doing all that." His voice was low, trembling slightly. He finally looked at her directly, and for the first time, she could see the weight of guilt settle on his face like a physical thing. I thought the house was just ours. I didn't know you were paying the taxes. I didn't know you were fixing the leaks, keeping everything together. I didn't know you cared that much." Eliza's chest tightened. For years, she had been invisible, her contributions dismissed or unnoticed. And now, here he was, finally acknowledging them. Not with words alone, but with the raw, painful recognition in his eyes. "You didn't know," she repeated softly. "That's the part that hurts the most. That's the part that never changes, even now. You think just because I didn't yell, or fight, or make a scene, that it didn't matter. But it did. It mattered more than you can ever understand." Mark swallowed hard. He was silent for a long moment, as if trying to measure the enormity of what she had just said. Finally, he spoke again, his voice quieter, almost ashamed. I took it for granted. Everything. I always thought I'd just inherit it, you know? I didn't think anyone else had put so much into it. I didn't think anyone else cared like you did." Eliza's eyes filled with tears. She had long ago stopped expecting apologies, but she could see that Mark was finally realizing the depth of his oversight. "It's not about taking it for granted," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "It's about realizing that love, effort, care, those things don't come automatically with ownership. You can't just assume them. You can't just take them for granted because the law says it's yours." Her words hung in the air. Mark ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that had always been a sign of frustration in him. But now, it wasn't frustration toward her. It was frustration toward himself. Frustration that he had failed to see what was always in front of him. Frustration that he had been blind for so long. I feel like an idiot," he said finally, voice breaking slightly. "All these years. I thought I was the responsible one, the one everyone counted on. And now I see, you were the responsible one. You did everything quietly. You kept the house alive. You kept the family together in ways I never even noticed. And I didn't see it. I didn't notice you." Eliza blinked back tears. Her throat tightened. She had imagined this moment countless times, the moment her contributions would be recognized, the moment Mark would finally understand what she had carried silently for so long. But she hadn't imagined it would feel this raw, this fragile, this heavy with years of unspoken grief. "Mark," she whispered, her voice softening, "this isn't about guilt. It's about understanding. You don't have to feel guilty, but you do need to see me. Really see me. Not as the quiet sister, not as the helper, not as the shadow behind you. See me as me." Mark's shoulders sagged. He looked away for a moment, staring at the floor, his mind replaying memories he had long ignored. The weekend she had spent cleaning the house while he went to the city, the summers she had sacrificed her own happiness to maintain the property, the countless times she had paid bills without a word, the nights she had stayed awake worrying about leaks or broken windows, all of it had been invisible to him. And now he could see it, finally, in the words on the deed and the intensity of her voice. "I never thought about all that," he admitted. "I just assumed. I don't know, that someone was taking care of it. And I never even considered it might be you. I just assumed it would always be fine. That it would always be there. And now I see, it was you who kept it alive." Eliza's chest felt like it was both breaking and lifting at the same time. "Yes," she said softly. "It was me. But I didn't do it to get credit. I did it because I loved the place. Because it mattered. Because it was home." Mark's gaze softened. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. I didn't realize how much it mattered to you. I didn't realize that it wasn't just a house for me. That it was your home, too." Eliza nodded, tears spilling freely now. "It always was." For the first time, Mark sat in silence, not trying to argue, not trying to defend himself. He just listened. He absorbed the weight of what she had endured, the quiet strength she had displayed all these years, the sacrifices she had made without complaint. And in that silence, a shift occurred, a soft, trembling awareness that he had been blind, and that the responsibility of truly understanding and respecting Eliza was now his to bear. "You know," he began slowly, choosing his words with care, "I always thought I had it all figured out. That I was the one who mattered most. That I would be the one to inherit everything. And I guess I thought that meant I would just automatically get what I wanted. But now I realize, that's not what it's about. It's about the people who put their heart into it, the people who actually care for it. And you've always cared more than anyone else. Even me." Eliza swallowed, feeling the tension in her body release slightly. It wasn't fully over. There were still wounds that needed time to heal. But for the first time, she sensed that Mark was starting to understand her, not just the deed on paper, but the woman behind it. Mark's voice broke further. I want to make it right. I don't know how yet. But I see it now. I see you, Eliza. And I don't want to take it for granted again." Eliza felt a mixture of relief and wariness. Words could be easy, actions were harder. But this was the moment she had been waiting for: acknowledgement, recognition, understanding, and perhaps, slowly, the start of reconciliation. She nodded. "Actions matter more than words, Mark. And I hope you'll remember that. Because the lake house, it's more than just property. It's memories, it's love, it's care. And if you want to honor it, you'll honor that. Not just me." Mark nodded solemnly. "I will. I promise." Her parents watched quietly, their faces a mixture of pride and regret. They knew the road ahead would be long and imperfect, but they could see that Eliza's voice had finally been heard, that Mark was beginning to recognize the depth of her contributions, and that maybe, just maybe, the family could begin to heal. The lake house sat quietly outside the window, its wooden frame catching the late afternoon sun. To Mark, it no longer felt like a prize. To Eliza, it no longer felt like a burden she had carried alone. And to both of them, it had become a symbol, not of ownership or inheritance, but of understanding, acknowledgement, and the fragile beginnings of reconciliation. Eliza exhaled, feeling her chest lighten for the first time in years. She knew the journey was far from over. There would be hard conversations, lingering resentment, and moments of doubt. But in that moment, she also knew that Mark had finally realized something crucial. That life, family, and love weren't about entitlement. They were about seeing each other, truly, completely, and carrying that understanding forward. The lake shimmered outside the window, calm and endless, reflecting both their faces. And for the first time, they both saw themselves clearly, not just as siblings, but as partners in the care of something greater than themselves. The legacy of their family, the weight of shared memories, and the potential for a future where both of them mattered.